On May 13, 2026, President Donald Trump landed in Beijing for a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping that every foreign policy expert in the world had been watching for weeks. The stated purpose of the meeting, according to both the White House and the Chinese Foreign Ministry, was to discuss cooperation on the Iran crisis and broader regional stability issues. The real purpose, according to multiple sources who have now spoken to both the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and regional intelligence agencies, was to negotiate a deal that would fundamentally reshape the balance of power in the Western Pacific. And by the time Trump left Beijing 2 days later on May 15th, Taiwan had lost something it may never get back: American protection. To understand what happened in that room, you first need to understand the desperate position Trump was in when he walked through the door. The Iran war, which began on February 28th with coordinated American and Israeli strikes, has now entered its 10th week, with no clear path to either military victory or a negotiated settlement that both sides could accept. American stockpiles of precision-guided munitions, according to a Center for Strategic and International Studies report published on May 4th, are running dangerously low. The military has already burned through roughly 45% of its Tomahawk cruise missile inventory and nearly half of its Patriot interceptor stocks. The Strait of Hormuz remains partially closed to commercial shipping, despite weeks of American naval operations. Oil prices are holding stubbornly above $90 per barrel. Inflation in the United States has climbed back above 4% for the first time since late 2024, driven almost entirely by energy costs. Trump promised the American people a quick, decisive victory that would demonstrate American strength and resolve. He did not deliver it. And with the 2026 midterm elections now less than 6 months away, he desperately needed something, anything, that looked like a strategic win he could sell to voters. China, meanwhile, holds the single most important card in the entire Iran game, and both Trump and Xi knew it going into the meeting. Roughly 60% of Iran's oil exports, before the American blockade began in late February, went to China through a network of intermediary companies and shadow tankers designed specifically to evade Western sanctions. Chinese banks, operating through subsidiaries in Hong Kong and Macau, processed the majority of Iran's remaining international transactions using a combination of cryptocurrency channels and traditional correspondent banking relationships that Western regulators struggle to track. Chinese companies supply critical components for Iranian infrastructure, from power generation equipment to telecommunications networks to industrial machinery that keeps Iran's non-oil economy functioning. If China wanted to, it could bring the Iranian economy to its knees within weeks, simply by enforcing American sanctions rigorously, instead of quietly circumventing them the way it has for years. The question Trump needed answered when he sat down across from Xi Jinping was brutally simple. What would it cost to get the leader of China to finally turn off the tap and let Iran collapse? The summit itself was conducted in extreme secrecy. No joint press conference, no detailed readout beyond a brief statement from both sides acknowledging that the two leaders had discussed global flashpoints, including the Middle East and cross-strait relations. But in the days immediately following the meeting, a pattern began to emerge in the diplomatic traffic between Washington and Taipei. American officials who had previously been coordinating closely with Taiwan on defense planning suddenly went quiet. Scheduled arms transfers that had been in the pipeline for months were abruptly put on hold without explanation. And when Taiwan's foreign minister attempted to schedule a call with his counterpart at the State Department, he was told Secretary Marco Rubio was unavailable and offered a deputy assistant secretary instead. By May 20th, exactly 1 week after the summit concluded, the outline of what had actually been agreed became clear through a series of leaks to the press. According to sources familiar with the discussions, Trump had offered Xi Jinping a package deal. In exchange for China cutting off financial support to Iran and enforcing stricter compliance with American sanctions, the United States would scale back its military support for Taiwan, delay or cancel several major arms sales, and reduce the frequency of so-called freedom of navigation operations through the Taiwan Strait. The deal was not a formal treaty. It was not written down in any document that will ever be released to the public. It was an understanding between two leaders, each of whom needed something the other could provide. The reaction in Taipei was immediate, public, and carefully calibrated to avoid openly criticizing Washington while making clear that Taiwan understood exactly what had just happened. Taiwan's president issued a statement on May 21st, reaffirming the island's unwavering commitment to self-defense and expressing continued confidence in what the statement carefully called the enduring partnership with the United States and all like-minded democracies. The language was diplomatic. The subtext was unmistakable. But behind the closed doors of Taiwan's presidential office building, according to senior officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to both Taiwanese and American journalists, the mood was one of profound betrayal and genuine shock. Taiwan had spent decades, generations, building its relationship with Washington on the foundational assumption that American support, while never guaranteed by any formal mutual defense treaty, was nonetheless reliable and durable as a matter of core strategic interest to the United States. The Trump-Xi summit in Beijing shattered that assumption completely in the space of 48 hours of secret negotiations that Taiwan was not informed about, not consulted on, and discovered only through press leaks days after the fact. The strategic logic of what Trump did makes a certain cold sense if you accept his premise about American priorities. From Trump's perspective, the Iran war is a direct threat to American economic stability and domestic political survival. Taiwan, by contrast, is a commitment inherited from previous administrations that costs the United States billions of dollars in arms sales subsidies and carries the constant risk of dragging America into a war with China. If Trump could trade reduced commitments in one theater for tangible help in another, why wouldn't he? The problem with that logic is that it ignores the signal the deal sends to every other American ally on Earth. If the United States is willing to quietly scale back its support for Taiwan in exchange for Chinese cooperation on an unrelated issue, what does that tell South Korea about American commitments on the peninsula? What does it tell Japan about the Mutual Defense Treaty? What does it tell the Philippines or Australia or any of the other countries in the region that have organized their entire security posture around the assumption that American guarantees are worth something? China, for its part, appears to have gotten exactly what it wanted from the summit and wasted absolutely no time capitalizing on the new reality. Within 72 hours of Trump's departure from Beijing on May 15th, Chinese state media outlets, including Xinhua, People's Daily, and China Central Television, began running coordinated stories highlighting the highly productive and constructive nature of the discussions and emphasizing Xi Jinping's critical role as a responsible global leader, personally helping to resolve the dangerous Iran crisis. The coverage presented Xi as the adult in the room, the statesman who could deliver results where others had failed. At precisely the same time, Chinese military aircraft dramatically increased their incursions into Taiwan's air defense identification zone to levels not seen since the early chaotic months of 2025. On May 17th alone, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense detected 47 People's Liberation Army aircraft crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait, the highest single-day count in over 8 months. The message being sent to Taipei was absolutely unmistakable and deliberately brutal. Your protector just negotiated you away. You are alone now. There is one additional element of this story that makes the entire situation even more dangerous than it appears on the surface. The deal Trump struck with Xi Jinping was done without consulting Congress, without briefing the relevant congressional committees, and without informing Taiwan in advance. It was personal diplomacy conducted at the highest level with no institutional oversight and no built-in mechanisms to ensure compliance or consequences if either side violates the understanding. Trump got what he needed politically, Xi got what he needed strategically, and Taiwan was left to figure out what any of it actually means for its survival. The long-term consequences of the Beijing summit are still unfolding in real time, but the immediate strategic and political effects are already highly visible across the entire Indo-Pacific region. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense announced on May 19th that it was launching an emergency comprehensive review of the island's military readiness posture and signaled publicly that it may significantly accelerate existing plans to develop indigenous weapons systems and domestic defense production capabilities, rather than continuing to rely heavily on American arms imports that could be delayed, canceled, or used as diplomatic leverage at any moment. Japan, which shares Taiwan's concerns about Chinese expansionism and has its own territorial disputes with Beijing, has quietly begun its own series of back-channel conversations with Taipei about potential security cooperation frameworks that would function independently of the United States and would not require American approval or participation. South Korea is watching nervously. Australia is recalculating. And in Washington, members of both the Democratic and Republican parties in Congress are publicly demanding answers about what specific commitments, if any, were actually made in Beijing, whether those commitments were memorialized in any written form, and whether the President has the constitutional and legal authority to unilaterally reshape America's entire strategic posture in the Pacific without any legislative approval, consultation, or oversight whatsoever. So here is the question that now faces every American ally in the Indo-Pacific region. If Donald Trump was willing to trade away Taiwan's security for help with Iran, what else is he willing to trade? And if American protection can be negotiated away in a closed-door meeting between two leaders with no congressional oversight and no formal documentation, how much is that protection actually worth? One side says Trump made a necessary deal to address an immediate crisis, and that Taiwan was never going to be defended by American troops anyway, so nothing has really changed. The other side says the president just told China that Taiwan is negotiable, and once you establish that principle, everything else is just haggling over the price.